well. You have ingredients like a root called madder. Middle East, that'll give you peach to carrot, orange to brick red. There's a spice from India, turmeric for the golden yellows. Welcome in, folks. We're talking about the dyeing a little bit. Indigo is really quite common. That's going to give you shades of blue, 13 distinct shades of blue, each with its own name. And then black walnut husk. Coming from our own black walnut trees in town, you can get really permanent shades of brown and tan. But mostly plants. There is one very unique exception. There's a bug from Mexico, harvested in the 18th century, called cochineal, shipped to Spain, then England, before it arrives here. And that is going to be one of your most highly valued, highly regarded dye ingredients for reds and pinks. And it's a little bug. Something that it actually produces on its shell, carminic acid, is still used today, but now as a food coloring rather than a textile dye. So next time you have red Skittles, red M&M's, strawberry yogurt, look at the protein on the particular flavor of yogurt. It's a little bit higher, and it's thanks to that insect that's still used today.
Well, that's nice to know I'm eating bugs.
Still showing up in our 21st century lives. Yeah. Dyeing is an excellent way to stay in style, though. You could take what you've already had in your wardrobe, maybe it's the color that's outdated, just have it re-dyed, over-dyed, and for $1/9 the cost, it's a look no one's ever seen before. And we do start out with a fair amount of fabric in our outfits. It's anywhere from 7 to 10 yards of cloth. So repurposing could even be as simple as maybe my cuff style is out of style. So I might have that redone, maybe trim added to it for gentlemen. You have a waistcoat or a coat that has a pocket flap that can be really decorative. And if you just swap out that style, you have a totally new look for a lot less. They're really savvy. Even as basic as an apron, I'm going to repurpose and recycle this as much as I can. Once this gets holey, I've been stepping on it going upstairs today. If that were to happen, I'd cut it into a smaller apron for my younger sister to have an apron to wear. And then that gets kind of tattered and torn and holey. We make rags and maybe diapers for younger siblings. This literally becomes threadbare. You sell it to the paper maker, and they're making it into rag paper if it's cotton or linen. They take it to a whole new level. They are very serious about recycling before they even have that true.
So this is wool, this is kind of the wool.
Exactly right. The wool is something we can find in town today in great abundance. We have a large flock of Leicester long wool sheep. It's a breed that's actually one created in the 18th century. A man named Robert Bakewell wanted both a meat sheep and a flea sheep. He created this hybrid standardized breed called Leicester long wool, and quite aptly named. These fibers coming off the sheep's back are anywhere from 5 to 14 inches long when it comes time to shear. So our first step, we jump in after the shearing process, and we'll start by washing that wool. Just using warm soapy water today, it kind of melts away the lanolin, dirt and debris will slide out of that fiber. We don't want to handle it too much, otherwise felting might occur, and brushing would be a lot more challenging. So I just want to line the fibers down. This step, called carding, comes from a Latin word cardus, meaning thistles. So I have my thistle-like bristles to do that job for me. Traveling in the same direction now, evenly distributed. I'm going to pull that off and actually roll it off into a form that sometimes is described as a roll-lag, sometimes as a bat. If you were to collect a whole basket full of these, and let's say it's not the finest quality, you might use it as batting instead and stuff pillows and quilts. Often used to stuff if it's really not ideal for clothing. Maybe it's very coarse quality of wool. A gentleman in Williamsburg actually used wool from primarily meat sheep to pack wine bottles into a crate so they wouldn't bump into each other. So I thought that was really clever. Nowadays you'll find certain breeds of sheep that are more meat sheep. Their wool is still shorn from them, and it's used for insulation in places like New Zealand. A lot can be done with it. We usually go for spinning in our shop though. So as I put my foot on the pedal, I'm powering the spinning wheel, and the wheel is doing two really important jobs. It's giving me twist, and it's also pulling the yarn in from my hands as they build up a little bit more. And I'm kind of the twist manager. I want to make sure it goes into the fiber when I'm ready for it. Between my hands, I'll thin out those fibers to a certain density. This is kind of developed over time by feel and a lot of practice. And then when I insert that twist, it really becomes quite a strong hold, a strong joint. If I were to run out or break it, it's just a matter of adding more twist, overlapping those fibers, and really letting that twist do the job for me. Skill often taught at home to children by 6 and 7 years old, and sometimes outside of a household too. We know of a public flax house is how they described the spinning school down at Jamestown in 1646. They wanted a young lady and a young gentleman from the surrounding counties to come in, learn that skill at 7 and 8 years old, and then take it back home and teach people in their community how to spin. So there was this early initiative to really be more self-sufficient and productive, but then England really seized early on that maybe they're creating their own competition. So shortly after that, there are laws pertaining to textile equipment. We're not going to import equipment here. We can only have certain breeds of sheep that are meat sheep and maybe not the fleece sheep. So then they start to regulate our production here and discourage that industry growth. So as a result of that, still into the 18th century, you don't see a ton of weavers. It's not a lucrative trade. Most of our fabric, actually close to 90%, would have been imported. And if you're a farmer in Tidewater, Virginia, you probably have the mindset, why make it when I can buy it cheaper and with a greater quantity and variety. Definitely wartime though, it's a very different story. We opened up a mill in Williamsburg with 20 to 30 looms, like this 11th century model counterbalance loom, all under one roof. And instead of coarse separative fabrics like the one you find on the loom today, they're making really coarse linen, hemp, and woolen fabrics for soldiers for our new Navy. You need about 10,000 yards of fabric for one mid-size ship at Jamestown. That's 10,000 hours of weaving time, hopefully split among many weavers and even more spinners than that.
That was a lot of work.
You'll create work rings here and determine what kind of patterns could be made on the loom. Then she wrote out, second part of the making that design is using the petals in a certain way to raise and lower those yarns that have been divided into 2 layers. The layer to go over, the layer to go under. And by sending a shuttle in between, you've accomplished that just with the flick of your wrist. Over and under 1,300 yarns in a very decorative way. Packing and stacking, we're entering into the border. That's why the design looks ever so slightly differently. Just changing up the treadling sequence to ensure that that design is mirrored and mimicked throughout. And it's the quickest way we know how to build up cloth, whether it is the grain sack or sailcloth. It's going to be about 1 yard an hour to produce, and you need 10,000 yards of fabric for one mid-size ship at Jamestown, or sailcloth at least. And that's just the fabric. You have a bolt of cloth. You'll need to sew it together. So actually, I'm going to step down to the spinning wheel here, and folks, feel free to join us as you come in. There is a lot of spinning that's required to even be able to operate the loom, and this is that very first step that often young children were at least familiar with by the ages of 6 and 7. So taught at home, it was a skill that the machinery at least didn't take up a great deal of space, so you could easily put it down, pick it up throughout the day, and have it set out. I'm working with now the fiber that is what we consider the fabric of our lives, more cotton than anything in the 21st century. 18th century, a little bit more of a luxury good. Think about how you use silk today. You might use that cotton for a fine gown or suit you're wearing into town. And the very first step, once the cotton is harvested, is actually de-seeding, one of the most time-intensive aspects of cotton processing. 40 hours of work, Thomas Jefferson averages for 1 pound of fiber to be picked from these seeds within this cotton boll. Then from there, another 20 hours in the brushing step I just completed, and still 40 hours ahead of you. We're up to 100 hours of work just to take a pound of cotton and make it into enough yarn for about 2 hand towels. That's 2.5 modern work weeks, so you've got your 2 hand towels to show for it. So here in the colonies, we don't see a ton of cotton being grown, not as a cash crop, until Eli Whitney invents his cotton gin. So the vast majority of your cotton fabrics are coming out of Egypt, India, Turkey, China, and they're some of the finest quality you can get your hands on. I think we still think that about Egyptian cotton today, at least the price tag tells us we're supposed to think about that.
At least Mr. Pillow thinks so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the cotton fiber, and I have Q-tips on a string today. My goal is usually to make it as consistent as possible. Pulling back gently, letting that twist travel through. It's going to be a nice soft material. You wouldn't mind wearing against your skin. Good alternative though, when you have hot, humid weather, as we do for a number of months in Tidewater, Virginia, is that alternative up there. It looks like blonde ponytail or blonde hair. That is from the inside of the stem of the flax plant. Same source of flax seeds for breakfast foods today. When you crack open the very lengthy stem, you're going to find these fibers run the full length. Twist it into a yarn, just like I was doing with cotton. The name changes from flax to linen. That is the fabric that's going to be most prevalent in the 18th century. Think about how we still say there's a linen closet full of cotton towels. It kind of reflects just that popularity at one time where it was mostly linen in usage. Feel free to ask questions about anything I've mentioned, anything you want to know more about.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you.